2-hour on how to secure buyer's rep commission. My name is Chiaki Brown. I'll be your instructor today. We've got a pretty big crew scheduled, so we're asking if everybody, if they haven't already done so, to rename yourselves to your first and last name followed by your Trek license number. Um, if you're kind of unfamiliar with how to do that, all you got to do is scroll over your picture wherever you see your video feed. Once you scroll over it, a blue box will appear in the top right-hand corner with 3 dots. Click on that blue box, scroll all the way down to where it says rename. And if you're successful, it'll look like mine does right now with first and last name followed by track license number. If you still can't figure it out, no biggie, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to let anybody slip through the cracks. You can shoot us a text as well, a chat, excuse me.
What
Uh,
I
Go
gotta
ahead
do?
and click on the chat box and put your first and last name followed by your track license number in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and try to get you taken care of on the back end as well. Without further ado, we're going to hear a word for our sponsor, and then we'll dive right into class, ladies and gentlemen.
Need to go higher volumes.
This 2-hour class?
2 hours. Yeah.
Thank you for joining class today. Vortex Realty is proud to sponsor today's course, and we look forward to sponsoring classes on a weekly basis. Vortex Realty has developed a platform for real entrepreneurs, producers who want to maximize substantial financial gains from their efforts, agents who want a real chance at growing their independent business, teams who want to harvest the true capitalization from leverage. We only charge $300 per year and $300 per transaction. You keep the rest to structure your business, your team, or your marketing with the financial injection it needs to meet the goals you want. Or enjoy it with your family. You earned it and you should keep it. We offer true broker support, team structuring, seamless technology, multiple MLS memberships, an awesome support staff, tons of education, and let's be honest, a beautiful opportunity. Check us out at joinvortex.com or give us a call at 210-647-6557. We look forward to developing a great relationship with you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive right into class here and start our presentation. So as I said earlier, hopefully everybody is here for a 2-hour course called Securing Buyer's Rep Commission. Oops. Oops, I'm sorry about that. I messed up there. So, course number is 49934. It's 2 hours of continuing education. It is contract approved education. So this class will definitely qualify towards that 3 hours of mandatory contract approved education that Trek has made as a requirement for your MCE now to renew your license. Your Trek education provider is Chiaki Real Estate School. Our provider number is 10783. And your instructor is this ugly white guy with a Japanese name, Chiaki Brown, and I have the pleasure of being a broker of a company called Vortex Realty. So we've got some small housekeeping items to go over before we get started. Trek has been nice enough to consider this style of education delivery a classroom. So with that being said, we're going to have to treat it like a classroom, and your camera's got to be on during class time. We are going to get some breaks. Right around 1 o'clock, we'll get a break, and it's okay if you turn it off during then, but during class time, cameras must be on. Now, students also must be engaged during class, and then all students are going to be on mute to ensure high quality audio for everybody else. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. You guys are the soldiers on the front lines. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, or if you got a war story that pertains to what we're talking about, we'd love to hear it. We're going to credential everybody before our first break today. That's going to be about 1 o'clock. So in between now and about 1 o'clock, if you guys could just grab yourselves a government issued photo ID, have it ready. I'll make sure that we credential everyone and we get that full 10-minute break. I won't let it eat into the break time. And then everybody's going to see a course and instructor evaluation form. It's going to be placed in the chat box. Please click on that link, fill it out, get it back to us. We pay close attention to that. And if there's anything we can do to enhance the education delivery and still stay compliant, we're going to do it. And then we're going to conduct something at the end of the course today called attendance verification. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. So, does anybody have any questions before we begin, ladies and gentlemen? Right. Well, our learning objectives today are to dissect each paragraph of the compensation agreement between brokers. It's a TXR 24-2. And dissect paragraph 12A1B, which is settlement and other expenses of the 104 family contract. Understand how each paragraph may affect the consumer. Understand how to explain each paragraph to the consumer, and demonstrate confidence by navigating the forms successfully. So I think, before we get too far into this, we need to understand why we're all here today, right, ladies and gentlemen? Why is this group of real estate professionals in a Zoom class right now talking about how to secure a buyer's rep commission? I thought all that was figured out when I got in the business, right? So what are we doing here? Well, the reason we're here doing this is obviously NAR issued a practice change, and that has affected our business to where we've had to utilize some additional tools to stay compliant. So the National Association of Realtors was sued in a series of class action lawsuits alleging that its compensation rules, which required listing brokers to offer compensation to buyer's agents, amounted to antitrust violations and artificially inflating commission prices and reducing competition. Now, I don't agree with that. A lot of us don't agree with that. Here in Texas, we've been awesome. We've always looked after people. But what happened is there was a group of home sellers in somewhere in the nation, I believe it's Missouri, and they didn't like the National Association of Realtors policy that says if a listing agent was going to list a property in MLS, that they had to offer a cooperative compensation, a co-broke fee to the buyer's agent. And that's how it took traction. And this group of sellers said, that's unfair. Why should I be forced to have to pay for the buyer's agent's commission just to list my property in MLS? So looking outside the box at this, we really have to understand what the National Association of Realtors is. And what they are is they are a humongous trade association. Okay. I think they're great. We get a lot of cool tools from them. We get RPR, zip forms, all this stuff comes from the National Association of Realtors, but they are a trade association. So it's kind of similar to a union. They don't give us our licenses. They don't have the power to revoke our license, issue a license, renew a license. That is the Texas Real Estate Commission who has that power to license us and regulate us. But what gives the National Association of Realtors a lot of power is the fact that they own just about all the MLSs across our nation. Okay, so they are able to regulate us when we join them and become a member. And when we are a member of the National Association of Realtors, we get the highly respected name of Realtor, and we're held to higher standards, and we have a code of ethics through them. So how the National Association of Realtors has teeth is they can say, hey, if you don't do what we say, we're going to cancel your membership. And that transcends into not having access to MLS, because you got to be a member of the local board or the National Association of Realtors and then the local board to gain access to be a member of MLS. Most of the boards here in San Antonio, they say board membership is mandatory, but MLS is voluntary. But without MLS, a residential real estate broker is handicapped. So that is the teeth of this right now. That is what NAR has is power. And I think all of us liked the way it was before all of this stuff happened. MLS had a lot of transparency as far as what the cooperative compensation is. These days, unfortunately, an environment has been created where our first phone call is about our paycheck instead of the buyer's interest. And I don't think a lot of us are too happy about that. So this is how we got here, ladies and gentlemen. The National Association of Realtors was sued. And these were the allegations. Now, the outcome of the NAR class action lawsuit was, well, the core argument was that the lawsuit argued that NAR's cooperative compensation rule, that was the rule that says if you're going to list something in MLS, you got to offer a co-broke free, a cooperative compensation. And the lawsuit argued that the rule forced home sellers to pay inflated buyer broker fees and restrain price competition among buyer brokers, effectively keeping commissions in a 2.5 to 3% range. I think Texas has been golden through this. All of our forms have always said that commission is negotiable, and we've always worked with buyer's rep agreements. But there are some states that didn't even have buyer rep agreements, unfortunately. So the participation rule, the plaintiffs challenged, NAR's participation rule, which mandated MLS participants to offer compensation to cooperating firms, including buyers firms. The antitrust allegations were that the plaintiffs alleged that NAR and some brokerages conspired to raise, fix, and maximize commissions earned by real estate agents. And in order to avoid the prospect of treble damages, NAR agreed to settle this case, which included a payment of $418 million over 4 years to eligible class members and agreed to modify the rules governing cooperative compensation. So the attorneys got paid a bunch and those sellers got paid some, I guess. You know, that's how that worked out. Now, the settlement agreement resulted in changes to how real estate commissions are handled, including the elimination of the participation rule, requiring sellers to offer compensation to buyer's agents. So that is how we saw the commission being offered in MLS being taken out of MLS, because that was one of the rules that the NAR agreed to in the settlement. So the elimination of the participation rule meant that cooperative compensation, usually it was the Buyers Brokers Commission. Here in San Antonio, our MLS said BC, Buyers Agent Commission. Some MLSs call it something else, but it's all considered cooperative compensation in the Buyers Brokers Commission. And one of the rules is that any offer of cooperative compensation is now prohibited from being in MLS. Okay, so can't have a BC in MLS anymore. Can't have an offer of cooperative compensation in MLS. And when this was coming down, a lot of people were trying to get creative. You know, they were saying, hey, well, we'll put it in agent remarks. You know, we'll put it in offer instructions. And you know, we would ask those questions and the MLS would say, no, any offer of cooperative compensation is prohibited. We're not going to allow it. That is part of the settlement that NAR's agreed to, so we're not going to allow it. So realtors can still market cooperative compensation via their websites, social media, signs, and pretty much anywhere else that they market except for MLS. Can't be there anymore. Okay. So we no longer are able to put the BC, the Buyer's Agents Commission, the cooperative compensation in MLS. And that's why we're all here to figure out, well, how do we navigate this post-NAR settlement environment that I don't think a lot of us are too happy to be in, but we're muscling through it. So before the NAR settlement, MLS secured the Buyers Brokers Commission. Before the rule change, the BC, the Buyers Commission, was in MLS. The listing broker would post the BC, the offer of cooperative compensation, when they listed the property. And usually there was no need to secure the cooperative compensation, the Buyers Agents Commission, Buyers Brokers Commission, with any additional forms. Because before the NAR settlement, if a listing broker didn't pay, then the buyer's broker could file a grievance with the local board, which is in conjunction with TXR and NAR. And the local board here in San Antonio, they're called San Antonio Board of Realtors, SABOR, would make the listing broker pay or terminate their membership. Terminating their membership, they no longer have access to MLS, and it would handicap that brokerage. So that was the teeth that we didn't have to secure it with any additional forms. And I never ran into that, but maybe once in my 20-year career where a broker didn't pay, and that's because the seller didn't pay them. They were apologetic about it. We filed a grievance, me and the agent. We got to go to a hearing, and lo and behold, they knew they were in the wrong, and they paid because they still wanted access to MLS. And that's how MLS pretty much secured the Buyer's Agent Commission. So those are the good old days. After the NAR settlement, buyers brokers must now secure their commission in writing because MLS will no longer do so. So how are we doing that? Well, basically it's up to the buyer's agent to find out if the listing broker is offering any cooperative compensation. And, you know, with some brokers, that's a challenge. With others, it's just very, very transparent. It just depends. If they say yes, then we can secure the commission via a compensation agreement between brokers. And that's what we're going to go over first. If they say no, and the buyer would like to make the commission, they owe their broker, the buyer's broker, a part of negotiations. Then we can secure the commission via paragraph 12A1B of the 1-to-4 family contract. And we'll be going over that in round 2. So the current forms needed to secure buyer's agent commission are numero uno, buyer's rep. Remember, another rule out of this settlement is before you show any buyer a home, you must be in a written agreement. So you got to have a buyer's rep agreement. There has to be the commitment from the buyer to pay the buyer's broker, right? Then compensation agreement between brokers or paragraph 12A1B of the 1-to-4 family contract. And most of the time it's either or, but there are certain scenarios where you could possibly use both. And we'll go over some of those. Now, a lot of people are asking, well, what about that addendum regarding broker's fees? You guys remember that confusing form that didn't make any sense to a lot of us? Well, as of December 16th, 2024, the TXR 2406, the addendum regarding broker's fees is no longer available. The form basically filled the gap during the transition to the new NAR rule change regarding broker compensation. And it was a very confusing form. Basically, it was an addendum. And a lot of us brokers and realtors and sales agents said, hey, why are you guys putting this in an addendum? Because we had the need to have a tool, a document that would bind the seller to pay the buyer's brokerage if the buyer couldn't pay, or if the buyer wanted to make it a part of negotiations. And a lot of us felt, hey, that this addendum might get lost. We might submit an offer and the listing agent lets the seller sign off on the offer and the addendum might get lost. And the confusing part about this addendum, which I'm not going to spend too much time on since it's been discontinued, is the first two paragraphs were purely for informational purposes. The first paragraph referenced, the compensation agreement between brokers. And the second paragraph referenced a compensation agreement between broker and owner, if there was one. And then the third paragraph had some teeth to it. It had the ability to bind the seller to pay the buyer's broker. So that was the teeth of that addendum. Now, this power has been incorporated into paragraph 12A1B of the 104 family contract. So they've taken the teeth of that addendum and they've incorporated into paragraph 12 of the 104 family contract, which is good. That's what we wanted. It's within the contract now. It's not an addendum. It's within the contract. If the buyer wants to make it a part of negotiations, we fill in the spot. So that's good that it's not an addendum anymore. But I think all of us are very, very happy that the addendum regarding broker's fees is gone because it was a very confusing document. So what does the compensation agreement between brokers look like? Well, let's just say I'm the buyer's agent and I am representing this buyer, and this buyer is interested in a property, and I'm calling the listing agent saying, hey, you guys offering any cooperative compensation? Yeah, we're offering, for example purposes, we'll just say 3%. Great. I'm going to send you over a compensation agreement between brokers, Mr. Listing Agent. Okay, cool. Or it might go down that the listing broker or agent is very, very organized, and they might already have one filled out with their signature on it that they can email to you. That's why I see a lot of this going down sometimes. Now, once I have contacted the listing broker and figured out that they are offering cooperative compensation, I need to secure it in writing with this document. So what this document does is it registers your buyer with the listing broker. It binds the listing broker to pay the cooperative compensation to the buyer's broker. And you want to execute this agreement before submitting an offer. That is what TXR recommends. They say, hey, if they're offering it and your buyer is going to submit an offer or very, very interested, you should submit this document to the listing broker and get it executed before you submit an offer. That's the recommendation right now. So what does this form look like? Well, paragraph 1 is pretty simple. Who are the parties to this agreement? And the parties are the listing broker and the cooperating broker, not the buyer and the seller, but the listing broker, the cooperating broker, because the form's called a compensation agreement between brokers. Okay, so you're going to fill in listing broker's information where it says listing broker, their full address, their phone number, and then cooperating broker's information and all their information there. Make sure that you put your broker's info here. Don't put your personal name. You want to put your broker's info because you were looked at as a representative of that broker, that brokerage. And this agreement is between that broker, that brokerage, and the other broker. Okay. So it's okay. I let my agents put the brokerage name, comma, and then put their name. Some brokers let their agents do that. I would say consult with your sponsor and broker, make sure that they're okay with that before you start doing that, and just make sure of these things. Now, paragraph 2 of this document talks about the property. What property is the buyer interested in making an offer on? That's what's going to go here. So property means the following real property in Texas, together with all its improvements and fixtures. And it says full address or description. So you can put the address. You can check a box if you don't have enough room, and you can attach an exhibit to this actual agreement. So Address usually works just fine. If you want to take it to the next level, you can put legal descriptions as well. And then, of course, if you don't have enough room, you can check this box and create an exhibit. Now, these exhibits that we talk about, they're not a promulgated document in zip forms that you're going to be able to type in exhibit and find. So usually what I've seen people do is create their own in a Word doc, call it exhibit, call it exhibit to the compensation agreement between brokers, between whomever, and then you can put the address there. And then you're going to check the box that says, or as described in the attached exhibit, and attach the exhibit to the document. And that's the rare instance that you have an address that is huge and you don't have enough room here. So you're going to insert the address of the property your buyer could be making an offer on. And then obviously if you're attaching an exhibit, just make sure you check the box that you're doing so. Once you check the box, that will attach it to this agreement. Now, paragraph 3 is the registration. A lot of people are getting confused with this paragraph. But usually what I tell people is, usually the questions are within the form, if you read it. So registration means you're registering your buyer client with the listing broker. That's basically what we're doing here. So it says cooperating broker registers whoever the buyer client is right here with listing broker, principal broker. Listing principal broker represents the owner of the property, owner, and cooperating broker represents client. So what you're going to do is just input the buyer client's name right here. Make sure you put all of them, make sure you spell the names right, all that good stuff. Paragraph 4 is the term of this agreement. And there's been a lot of questions about this. How long should we make this? Does this agreement have to be in effect during the term of the contract? What happens if this agreement expires before the contract closes? And here's the thing to remember with all this. As long as this agreement is alive, when the buyer and the seller execute a contract, your fee is earned, the commission is secured. So this document could expire before closing. But as long as everybody signed the actual 1-4 family contract or whatever sales contract they're signing, while this contract was alive, you're okay. Okay, so those are the time contingencies to this agreement. So you want to insert the day the agreement begins and the day the agreement ends. And you want to make sure you have enough time for the buyer to go under contract. That's what's important. Not the closing date, but when the buyer goes under contract, this agreement is live. The fee is earned when the buyer and seller go under contract. Now, paragraph 5.
Chiaki?
Yeah.
So do we include like the end until the end of the option period as far as the dates?
You could, I'm seeing people just put a month to 2 months out. Some people are putting 3 months out. I think you're safe in that regard because, if you guys haven't negotiated to where you guys have executed an agreement within a month, chances are it might not happen if it's residential or something like that. But you just want to make sure it doesn't really matter if it's past the option period or during the option period, and you're not really gonna know when that option period starts because this is just registering the buyer, right? We're just making an offer right now is all we're doing.
Yeah.
So we're just registering the buyer and we're saying, hey, we're securing that cooperative compensation that you guys are offering, and usually the listing agent understands, hey, as soon as people are asking for this, they might be sending me an offer, so you get that communication going instead of text messages and things, which is great. So I would say a month you're fine, but the pivotal thing is, do I have enough time for the buyer and seller to execute and go under contract on the 1-4? And if this is document is alive when that happens, you're safe. No worries on that.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Good questions. Paragraph 5 talks about the nitty-gritty. What is the cooperative compensation being offered? And I think a lot of us don't understand that we've got to have these documents to secure our commission for sales and rentals and leases, because both of those offers of cooperative compensation used to be in MLS, and now they're not. So now we got to secure them in writing, hopefully with a compensation agreement. So how paragraph 5 reads is it says, when earned and payable, listing principal broker will pay cooperating broker. It says complete all that apply. If it's a sell, you're going to do either or here. You're going to do a percentage of the sales price or a lump sum. Don't do both. That's why they put the or there. If it's a lease, you're going to fill in a percentage of 1 month's rent. Client is obligated to pay under the lease, or just a lump sum, whatever's been negotiated there. Just don't do both. Now, 5B goes over when is this fee earned and payable. And this is where I get the whole, this agreement has to be alive when the buyer and seller go under contract. So earned and payable. Cooperating brokers' fees are earned when client enters into a binding agreement during the term of this agreement to buy or lease all or part of the property at any price. Cooperating brokers' fees are payable if cooperating broker is the procuring cause of the sale or lease, and when a lease is executed or when a sale closes, either during the term or after it ends, because it can end. But if we earned our fee, they entered into a contract when this agreement was alive. Listing principal broker is not obligated to pay cooperating broker any fee if, through no fault of the listing principal broker and in the exercise of good faith and reasonable care, it was impossible or financially unfeasible for the listing principal broker to collect its fee under the separate agreement with the owner. Any escrow or closing agent is authorized to pay cooperating broker's fee from listing principal broker's fee at closing. So what does that last statement mean? Well, that means the listing broker has a listing agreement with the seller. The seller has agreed to pay them a commission. And with it, that commission is going to be taking a chunk out, and they're going to pay us that cooperative compensation with it. So what happens if the seller does not pay the listing broker? Now, I've never seen this happen. I think this is just a CYA thing here. But what happens if the seller does not pay the listing broker? Well, that last sentence is saying, well, if the seller didn't pay the listing broker, we're not going to make the listing broker pay you funds that they haven't gotten from their client. If that ever does happen, it's going to be up to the listing broker if they want to sue that seller because they didn't honor the listing agreement. And based on this statement, I don't think that the buyer's broker is going to have any recourse on the listing broker. But I've never seen that happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but when it does, this is probably right after I say it. So let me just back up. It's there for a reason. Hopefully nobody gets into that situation. Now, paragraph 5C talks about related parties. And it basically is a CYA for us that, hey, you guys are going to try to go around us and wait until after this ends, or have your brother purchase the property or somebody purchase the property, since they are not in the compensation agreement, and maybe you guys could work out a better deal with the seller, who knows. So how it reads is it says, related parties. If a related party of client agrees to purchase or lease all or part of the property during the term, cooperating broker will be entitled to all compensation under this agreement, as if client had acquired the property. Related party means any assignee of client, any family member or relation of client, any officer, director, or partner of client, any entity owned or controlled by client, in whole or part, and any entity that owns or controls client, in whole or part. So they tried to capture just about every which way that they could go around us there. Hopefully we don't have to run into that either. Any questions about the form so far as the fees and all that good stuff? Okay. Now, paragraph 6 is where we execute, right? It says this is the entire agreement. Oops. This is the entire agreement of the parties. It may not be changed except by written agreement. This agreement supersedes any prior agreement between the parties concerning the same subject matter. Listing principal broker's name goes here. That's going to be the broker's name and the broker's license, or the business entity broker and the business entity license. Whomever the listing agent is sponsored by is going to go here. This next section can be the listing or principal broker signature, or it can be your signature. If it's your signature, you're going to check the box. And then you're going to sign, you're going to date it, and you're going to put your printed name and your license number. Consult with your sponsoring broker, make sure that they're okay with you signing this. I haven't met many who are not okay with you signing it, but some of them want to cross-reference the listing agreements to make sure that they're not obligating to any more than what's in there. So just consult with your sponsoring broker, make sure that you have that authority to sign. Then obviously on the other side, it's the same stuff. You know, who is the cooperating broker? What is their name? What is their license number? And either the cooperating broker or the broker's associate can sign and date. And then you got the cooperating broker's associate's printed name and their license number if you check the box and it is the cooperating broker's associate. Has anybody ran into any trouble with this so far? Anybody have any experiences that they want to share with compensation agreement between broker? Okay. All right. Well, good. You know, my hat is off to everybody who's a realtor right now. We have always been people who adjust, right? We adjust to the market. We adjust to hardcore sellers market, hardcore buyers market, you know, interest rates, whatever that may be, we've adjusted to it. And we've always known in sales that if you don't adjust, you're going to get left behind. But I don't think any of us realized how many hardcore adjustments we were going to have to make within the last 2 years. I mean, it seems as if they are popping new forms out every other month. So one thing that amazes me is your resolve, ladies and gentlemen. You guys have been muscling through this, and we've been taking this and we've been doing just fine. And the beautiful thing is now we have the tools to handle it. There's no more of this addendum regarding broker's fees. We've got it in the contract. We just need to get trained up and we're fine. So my hat's off to you. I'm amazed by your resolve, and I'm very proud to be your colleague. So keep on trucking. It's 12:38 right now. And before we dive into the next segment of the class, which is the paragraph 12A1B, I'm going to make sure that we get to take a break. And before we take our break, we're going to go ahead and get everybody credentialed. So at this time, you guys can just grab those government issue photo IDs, hold them up to the camera there, and what we did is we went over what I think is the easy way, right? It is the compensation agreement between brokers. So as a buyer's agent, we have a buyer's rep with our buyer, and we know that our buyer is interested in a certain property. And we want to figure out, are they offering any cooperative compensation? So we call that listing agent, or somehow we figure out they are, and we execute a compensation agreement between brokers. Well, at that point, your commission is secure because the listing broker is saying, hey, if this buyer that you've registered with us closes on our listing, our seller's home, then we are going to pay you the cooperative compensation in this agreement. So at that time, your commission is secure. You don't need to do anything else. Unless, maybe all the commission and the buyer's rep has not been accounted for in the compensation agreement. Now, the important thing to understand with both of these, the compensation agreement and paragraph 12A1B of the contract, and that's what we're about to go over, is who is paying the buyer's broker's commission. That's something important that we need to understand. And I know it's kind of confusing because in hindsight, it all comes from the seller, right? So everybody thinks, well, the seller's paying, the seller's paying, the seller's paying. But remember, the listing broker has a listing agreement with the seller, and the seller has agreed to pay the listing broker a payment, a commission in that listing agreement. So the listing broker is saying, hey, out of this fee that we're charging you, that we're making, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, we're going to break off some of this and offer it to the cooperating broker in cooperative compensation. So in that structure, it's looked at that the listing broker is paying the commission, okay? Because a lot of people are asking, well, who's paying it? Is it the buyer, is the seller paying it, or is the listing broker paying it? And if you have a compensation agreement between brokers, it's looked at as the listing broker is paying it because they're paying it from the fee they're charging the seller. Now, what if you're doing your due diligence, your buyer's very interested in this property, and you're calling the listing broker or you're getting a hold of them somehow? You say, hey, nice listing over there on 123 Main Street. I've got a buyer who was interested in it. You guys offering any cooperative compensation? And they say, no, we're not. We're not offering nothing, because the new listing agreement allows them to do that. It allows the seller to make a decision to say, I am not going to offer any cooperative compensation. I only want to pay you as my listing broker, and I expect the buyer to pay the buyer's broker per their agreement. That's how I want to do this. So if you call or get a hold of the listing broker and they say, no, we're not offering cooperative compensation, or there are some brokerages out there who are not working with compensation agreements between brokers. They will tell you, well, the seller might consider it, go ahead and submit an offer. And to me, that is, okay, well, then there's no cooperative compensation coming from the listing agent, because nothing in writing is going to secure that. So I'm going to have to go to paragraph 12A1B now. So what if the listing agent says, no, we're not offering any cooperative compensation? There's no reason to send me over a compensation agreement between brokers. I'm not going to sign it because we're not offering any. Well, the buyer can choose to make the commission owed in a buyer's rep agreement a part of the negotiations. You got to turn around and tell the buyer, they're not offering any cooperative compensation, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. And what that means is you are going to owe me what's in the buyer's rep agreement. And the buyer turns around, the buyer says, but the lender's got my firstborn child and 2 pints of blood. They got all my money. I don't have any money to pay you, right? That's what we're going to hear from the buyer most of the time, in my opinion. So the buyer turns around and says, hey, can you ask the seller to pay this for me? Can I make it a part of negotiations? And the answer to that is yes, we can. We can make that part of negotiations. We can use paragraph 12A1B of the 1-to-4 family contract and ask the seller to pay what you owe us in the buyer's rep for you. And if the buyer chooses to do that, you're going to write it up in the contract and you're going to use paragraph 12A1B. So that's kind of why I said at the beginning, it's important to understand who's paying the cooperative compensation, because in the first example, it was the listing broker, right? We're asking it in the form of a compensation agreement between brokers. They've signed it. Okay, I'm going to pay you out of the fee I'm charging the seller. In this regard, paragraph 12A1B, it's the seller who's paying it directly out of their proceeds to the buyer's broker at closing. So that's where they're getting this, who's paying it, and, everybody says the seller's paying everything. We understand that, but the breakdown is if it's a compensation agreement between brokers, listing brokers paying it. If we're going to put in the contract in paragraph 12, seller's paying it. So 12A1B can bind the seller to pay the buyer's broker directly. It obligates the seller to pay some or all of the fees in the buyer's representation agreement that the buyer would otherwise owe the buyer's brokerage. And the buyer can choose to utilize paragraph 12A1B and ask the seller to pay what the buyer owes the buyer's broker in the buyer's representation agreement. What does that look like? Well, this is the red line version of paragraph 12 in our 1-to-4 family contract. So what a red line version is it shows you the language that was stricken from the contract in red and the language that was inputted into the contract in blue. So it kind of makes us that much more resourceful because we know what it used to say, what it says now, and why they took it out. So if you read the entire paragraph here, which was revised November of last year, still pretty much really new to a lot of us. And it's mandatory use, meaning you have to use the new 1-to-4 family contract with the updated paragraph 12 as of January 3rd of this year. And if you want to get a copy of these red lines yourself, you can go to TXR's website or Trek's website. They got some awesome versions of it. So before any of this NAR settlement stuff, all of us knew paragraph 12 is straight up concessions, right? If my buyer needed some concessions and for to go towards their closing costs with the loan, prepaid items and things like that, then they could ask the seller to pay those things. Well, that's still in this paragraph, but that's in paragraph 12A1C now, okay? So this is where you're going to go for straight up concessions towards the buyer's loan. But if the buyer says, I want to ask the seller to pay for me what I owe you in the buyer's rep agreement, you put it in 12A1B. And this is how it reads. And in my opinion, I think that it's still very confusing. And I'm seeing a lot of agents be very confused with how it's worded. So how it's worded is it says, the following amount to be applied to brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay. And you check a box. You check box 1, that would be a lump sum, or you check box 2, that would be a percentage of the sales price. It says check one box only. So what I'm running into as a broker is I'm seeing a lot of agents say, well, I misinterpreted this sentence here because it says the following amount to be applied to brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay. And a lot of buyer's agents stop right there and like, wait a minute, I do not want to obligate my buyer to pay anything. What's going on here? What am I reading? Right? But we got to understand that what this is in reference to is the buyer's rep agreement. Okay? The following amount to be applied to brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay. Well, they've already agreed to pay brokerage fees in the buyer's rep agreement. And what this paragraph is doing is basically asking the seller to pay those fees for the buyer that the buyer has already obligated themselves to pay the buyer's broker in the buyer's rep agreement. Does that make sense? Because I mean, a lot of people are real confused about that. And I agree. I think it should be worded differently. Hopefully broker lawyer committee will do that. I'm pretty sure they're working on auto drive right now. So the reason this is a seller expense and this is not a buyer expense, even though it says applied to brokerage fees, buyer has agreed to pay, is the entire paragraph here is labeled seller expenses, right? So this is a seller's expenses paragraph. The buyer's expenses don't start until down here, 12A2. Anything in 12A1 is a seller's expense. So if we are putting something in 12A1B, that's going to be considered a seller's expense. So that's another way to confirm we're not obligating the buyer to anything else here than they've already agreed to. Does anybody have any questions about that? Have they ran into any problems with this so far? Okay. All right. All right. So the buyer has told you, can you ask the seller to pay for it? Can you ask the seller to pay for me what I owe you? And you say, sure, we can do that. We can put that in paragraph 12A1B of the contract. And the thing to do here is you want to make sure that it's the amount equal to in your buyer's rep. Because if it's lower than the amount in your buyer's rep, then your buyer is still going to be obligated to pay you the remainder. So if your buyer's representation agreement, for example purposes, says 3%, that's what they've obligated to pay the buyer's broker, and you only put 2% here, then obviously the buyer's still going to owe an additional 1%. If this is more than what is in the buyer's rep agreement, we're not allowed to make more than what is in the buyer's rep agreement. So if this is more than what's in the buyer's rep agreement, my suggestion is to go back and amend that buyer's rep agreement before you close. That's how a lot of people are handling bonuses and things like that right now. Now, that's the red line version. This is what it looks like now. If you go to zip forms, all the red stuff's been taken out, the blue stuff's been inputted, and this is what we have in zip forms. And in 12A1B, we're going to input the amount of commission the buyer is asking the seller to pay them. I owe 3% to my broker, and because that's what it says in my buyer's rep agreement, and I'm going to ask the seller to pay that for me. I'm going to check this box and I'm going to put 3% right here. Or you could do a lump sum. You would check this box and put a lump sum right here, depending on what the buyer's rep says, basically. Now, if the buyer still needs concessions in conjunction with their loan and closing costs, then that is a different paragraph. That's 12A1C right here. And that's what we're used to, right? We're used to 12, paragraph 12 is the spot that we would ask the seller to pay concessions to the buyer. And a lot of us got worried because most lenders have a cap of concessions that they will allow a seller to pay for a buyer. FHA, it's about 6% of sales price. VA, it's about 4% of sales price, and conventional, it can be, whatever the conventional bank's criteria is. So that's the lender making sure that the buyer has some skin in the game and that the seller's not making this happen for them. So a lot of us got scared and thought, okay, well, is this amount in 12A1B going to be counted towards that amount that's capped? Because that's going to hurt our buyer if they need a whole bunch of concessions, right? It's going to deplete that. And the beautiful answer to that question is no, it's not. Okay, so don't let that stop you. If your buyer needs the maximum 6% in FHA or something like that, you can still ask for that 6% concessions in 12A1C. And if the buyer's representation agreement says 3%, you can still ask for the 3% in 12A1B, and it's not going to go past the lender's cap on what they will allow the buyer to receive in concessions. So that's great, because that would have been a really, really bad problem that we would have been facing. Now, can we use both of these forms at once? And you know, the automatic answer to that is, well, yes. It really depends on what is in the buyer's representation agreement. Like today, right now, we're using 3% as an example, right? We all know commissions are completely negotiable. We're using 3% as an example. So let's just say we called the listing broker. We called them up. Hey, got a buyer. They're interested in this property. I'm thinking I'm gonna make an offer on it. You guys offering any corporate compensation? Yeah. But you know, we're offering 2%. Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna send you over a compensation agreement between brokers, and let's go ahead and get that executed so that I can submit you an offer. Okay, great. So you submitted the compensation agreement between brokers and you secure that 2%. But the buyer's representation agreement says 3%. Well, that means that the buyer would still owe the buyer's broker 1% per that representation agreement, right? So can you use both forms? Well, yeah, you can secure the 2% in the compensation agreement. And if the buyer is still wanting to make the 1% that they owe the buyer's broker, the remaining amount of that 3% of the buyer's rep, a part of negotiations, then you can ask for the additional 1% in paragraph 12A1B of the contract. So there are scenarios in which we could possibly use both forms. Now, this is what that would look like. Basically, the 1% would be secured in 12A1B.
And Chuck, you can get that, the buyer's broker, that is upfront even before the offer is submitted.
The compensation agreement between brokers,
Yes.
yeah. Well, basically TXR is recommending that we get this executed before we submit an offer.
Okay.
Right? So that's what they're recommending. Some people are rolling the dice and sending it with their offer and stuff like that, and it's just like you gotta trust the listing agent at that point, you know.
Right.
But I haven't heard of anybody taking advantage of anybody or anything like that. It's always in the back of our heads, right? So we
Right.
want to be sure of it. Yeah, good question. So I mean, this is what it would potentially look like here, ladies and gentlemen. It would be okay. Well, my buyer's rep says 3. I've got a 2% compensation agreement between brokers already, so I've secured 2% of that 3%. Then I turn around and I have to have this conversation with the buyer. It can't be automatic. You got to talk to the buyer and say, look, they are offering cooperative compensation. This is good, but unfortunately, they're only offering 2%, and the buyer's representation agreement that you signed with my brokerage says 3%. So you would still be responsible to pay me that additional 1%, not pay my broker that additional 1%. And the buyer says, but the lender's got my firstborn child and 2 pints of blood still. You know, I don't have 1% even. Can you ask the seller to pay that for me? Sure. Yeah, we can make it a part of negotiations. We can go back to paragraph 12A1B, and we can ask the seller to pay the additional 1% that you would owe in the buyer's rep. And if they sign off on this, we're good. Nothing's coming out of your pocket, Mr. Buyer. So this is a scenario in which you could use both forms. I've seen some agents just say, okay, well, I'm gonna go back and amend the buyer's rep, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna discount my commission to 2%. And you know, it's up to you if you want to do that. But the thing is, buyer's agents work hard, you know. I mean, showings, inspections, all that stuff. And you know, a lot of the times, I think the buyers have gotten used to it being at no cost to them, and there's still a way we can make it at no cost to them, but don't discount yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. You're worth every penny of what you charge. Your services are crucial, and we represent people in what is usually the biggest investment of most people's lives. It behooves them to have a good representative who knows what they're doing. So don't undervalue yourselves. At the same time, if that's the only way to make it work and my buyer doesn't have any money, yeah, I'm going to discount it to make it work because I care about people. So that's a situational thing that's up to you and your broker.
Chiaki,
Yes, ma'am.
on the agreement between brokers, so just as an example, is the listing agreement, listing broker, what if they were only getting 3%? So they're giving away 2/3 of their commission?
Well, if they're only getting 3%, I mean, we would have to look at the listing agreement, but chances are, if they're only getting 3%, I'm thinking that they're not offering any cooperative compensation, right? They're going to hold
Okay.
on to that and say, I'm not offering any. We expect the buyer to pay you, or you know what, you might want to try to make it a part of the contract or whatever. What I have seen people do is, the buyer really wants the property and the buyer doesn't have the money and the seller does not want to pay anybody but the listing broker, but they do have some room in appraisal, right? It's listed at 100,000, but it'll appraise for 103. So they give them a sales price of 103, and they ask for the compensation in the contract. And as long as the seller nets the same amount and it appraises, everybody's fine. That's interesting though, because that's what we used to do with the concessions too, right? To make things work. And all of this is because this quote unquote, we've been inflating sales prices, and here we are back at the same place we started. So does any of it make sense right now? No, we're just muscling through it, trying to take care of our clients' interest the best we can. We'll get through it.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, that's what I'm seeing a lot of people do. The thing is, you've got to have that appraisal window in order to make things work that way. If
Yeah.
it's already right there, it's just not going to happen.
So at that point, I'm sorry for interrupting, but at that
No,
point,
that's what we're all about. Carla, please do.
yeah, would we wait for the appraisal to come in, and you can't renegotiate at that point? How you just put it in the offer up front, like, hey, I mean, because of course, concessions, always done that, right?
Right.
But now I didn't even know we could do that for the commission. But I mean, we up front, and if it appraises, then great, and if it doesn't, then oh well.
Well, what would happen? What would happen is, let's just say it doesn't appraise, right? If it doesn't appraise, then the buyer's probably going to try to come to the seller with a sales price reduction amendment. And the seller's probably going to want to change the amount in one of these paragraphs here, 12A1C or 12A1B in the same amendment, right? So I mean, there's got to be room in order to make it work, and it's got to be full disclosure. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Barr, this is going to add to your loan amount. Are you cool with it? But they're fine with it. I mean, we've gotten creative in the past with the concessions, and sometimes we're getting forced to get creative and protect our buyers. Now, this is a scenario that is rare that I've seen, and I think it's because a lot of people don't know that they can use both of these forms in conjunction. But what this does is the fact that you can use both of these forms is it also creates a humongous red flag that I want everybody to be aware of, okay? So the red flag is, what if you're the listing agent and you are offering cooperative compensation? Let's just say, for example, purposes is 3%. The buyer's agent calls you and they say, yes, I'm offering 3%. You guys execute a compensation agreement between brokers for 3%. And then when they submit the offer, they also have 3% in paragraph 12A1B. That is asking for 6%, basically. It's asking for 3% from the listing broker right? In the compensation agreement between brokers. And it's asking for 3% from the seller. Okay. And I don't think that these buyers agents know that they're doing this. They just, wherever there's commission, I'm making sure I'm getting paid, right? And they don't understand the semantics of this, but I do see this as a potential red flag. Now, I haven't seen it happen yet, and I sure as heck don't want to be the precedent that it does happen with, because sooner or later there's going to be a greedy buyer's agent, a greedy buyer who are going to try to hold the seller and the listing agent to these things, and then the seller's going to turn around and go after the listing agent. I think it's going to create a mess. So if you are offering cooperative compensation as a listing broker, and you get an offer and paragraph 12A1B is filled in, and you know that your seller does not want to pay any more than what's in that cooperative compensation that is referencing your listing agreement, you got to get that buyer's agent to take that out of 12A1B. Okay, you got to get them to take it out of there. That their commission has already been secured with the compensation agreement between brokers, and unless their buyer's rep says 6%, and they're trying to get the other half out of the seller, which I doubt it's going to be a red flag. So as listing agents, if you're offering cooperative compensation, every time you get an offer, you need to be checking paragraph 12A1B. And I'm not saying that it needs to be blank every time, because if you're only offering 2 and they want an extra 1, okay, let's present it to the seller and see if they're willing to do it. But if the seller says, no, I'm not willing to do that, then we got to negotiate this in somehow. But what I'm worried about is the listing agent who hasn't taken this class or letting it slip, and all of a sudden they receive that contract that says 3% 12A1B, and they also have an executed compensation agreement between brokers for 3% as well. That potentially, and not potentially, it does create a dual obligation for the seller. And I think that is going to be a problem that we're going to have to deal with, sooner or later. But you guys are all getting trained up. You're coming to classes. I think we're going to be okay. It's those agents who are not training themselves up and are not staying ahead of this stuff, And this is just something that I figured out on my own. So I don't want to be the precedent on this. I don't want you guys to be the precedent on this. So if you got to listen, you got a compensation agreement executed, check paragraph 12A1B. Make sure it all makes sense, ladies and gentlemen. Before we do any attendance confirmation, I owe you guys one more break before I can get you out of here. It's 1:20 right now. Let's reconvene at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see everybody back here at 1:30. I really want to go over what we went over so far. So, compensation agreement between brokers if the listing agent is offering cooperative compensation. Very easy, one-page document to fill out. Either the listing agent is going to have it ready for you, or you need to submit it to the listing agent. And it's a good idea to get it executed before you submit an offer. Not before you show the property. You might be showing 6 properties and honing it into that one, so before you submit an offer, it's going to be a lot easier. And if the listing agent is not offering cooperative compensation, the other tool we have available to us is 12A1B of the 1-to-4 family contract. And we can use these forms in conjunction, or we can use just the compensation agreement, or we can use just paragraph 12A1B. Main thing is we want to make sure as listing agents that we don't commit the seller to more than they've already agreed to. Okay, so let's just be really, really adamant about that. And now that I've scared everybody a whole bunch, I usually will reserve this section of the class for any Q&As, any type of experiences that you guys have had with this particular document or what you're experiencing right now in the market, and try to get all that answered. We usually have a lot more questions in the class, and I think I might need to shorten this class to a 1 hour class, but that's okay. As long as the info gets out, that's all we need. But does anybody have any questions in regards to this? And the thing is, there's no such thing as a stupid question. This is new to us, and we need to get it organized. And I don't care if it's stupid, if it saves your client from suing you. So now is the time to ask away on this stuff.
Chiaki,
Yes, ma'am.
I due to health issues, I've really not done any deals for a long time. And
Sure.
so, for a very long time when I worked with buyers, I always told them, well, I won't charge you anything. I'll be compensated via the seller broker, closing. I'll get paid then. So
Right.
now, to me, the big beef with the NAR lawsuit is listing people that had their homes listed were complaining about, why do I have to pay for the buyer's representative? So all this time where the buyers more or less didn't have to pay their agent, their rep, anything, and now all of a sudden it's kind of on them. So what kind of pushback are buyers giving their buyer's reps when they go through the buyer's rep agreement?
Well, it's kind of the same pushback that we used to get, but you're right. We had that whole, I'm not going to show you properties unless they're offering this because I can see it in MLS, right? So everybody felt secured that way because, hey, they're offering it, and you're not going to pay it. It's not going to come out of your pocket. I have seen some agents sit with buyers and say, look, your criteria is what I'm going to look for, and if the buyer has directed them to say, look, I simply don't have the money to pay for it, and I don't want to fall in love with the home and not be able to negotiate it in. And they're making it part of their criteria sometimes to only show homes that are offering it. If that's the buyer's criteria, I'm going to take them out and I'm going to show them what the criteria is.
Okay.
That's something that our people are doing. What I think we need to know as listing agents in this environment we're in right now is it's really important how you explain
Mhm.
the listing agreement, especially paragraph 5. And we're working on a whole class on just the listing agreement. But if you guys haven't seen the new listing agreement yet, paragraph 5 is in reference to 5A is what we're always used to. 5A is we're going to charge this and we're going to offer this as cooperative compensation. It's all detailed out there. 5B is the one that says pay listing broker without any cooperative compensation, right? So that's the one. So I think it's really important when you guys are at a listing appointment, how you explain this to the seller, right? And I hate saying this way, but if we tell them, well, if you don't offer it, nobody's going to show the property and you're not going to get it sold, that's potentially another lawsuit, So you can't say that, and you almost have to think, this is a listing appointment, but you almost have to think this guy's an attorney trying to trip me up and I better have my ducks in a row. We're kind of forced to have that mentality to be safe. So what I'm telling agents to say, and what is a better way to explain things, if we get to 5B and the explanation should go, well, that's your right, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You've got every right to only pay me and not offer any cooperative compensation to the buyer's broker. But if you choose to do that, you will be pushing affordability away from 50% of the buyers in our market. And my job is to get the home sold. I do not want my buyer pool shrinking by 50%. I think it's a tactful way to explain it, and it's the truth. A lot of these buyers simply don't have the money, and they will give the criteria to their buyer's agent to say, only show me stuff that's offering cooperative compensation, or they will go look for a cheaper home in which they can afford it, or the bid rate flag is that they're going to try to get out of the buyer's rep and go directly to the listing agent
Yeah.
and be unrepresented and cause all kinds of liability. So there's a lot of stuff there. So I really think it's important how we explain it at that listing appointment. And truthfully, I haven't seen too many listing agents not offering cooperative compensation. I think it's being explained correctly. I think a lot of sellers are getting it and they understand what's going on, and then they're taking our advice, and then we're able to get these properties moved, even pre-summertime, even holidays, we're still being able to get properties moved if they take our advice. I mean, that's what we do. We give advice to get properties sold, right? So hopefully they listen to us. But it's real important. So, once again, that is your choice, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You got every choice to only pay me and not offer any cooperative compensation to the buyer's broker. But if you choose to do that, you will be pushing affordability away from about 50% of the buyers in the market. And that number might be more. I'm being kind of conservative with 50%. But I do think that is the best way to explain it. Now, what I am seeing, because this has been, since June, basically, of last year. So what I'm seeing is, properties that are not offering cooperative compensation, lo and behold, you give them an offer and you ask for it in the contract, and they will, or the longer it's on the market, the more negotiable they are, just like sales price and everything else in our business. So, it's up to us to be negotiators and find ways for our buyers. And I think we've got some, especially since it's in the contract now. And I have seen properties, here in San Antonio, I'm seeing a lot of properties appraised for more than sales price right now, which is a really, really good thing, because it had been quite the opposite for a while there. I think we're going to have a great summer. I'm already seeing a great uptick. If interest rates can get below a 6, we're going to get slammed, ladies and gentlemen, and we just need to be ready for it. But we just need to be careful, and it depends on, and I think you need to approach every listing appointment. This is an attorney trying to trip me up and jump on this class action bandwagon, and I'm not going to let them, and I'm going to explain things the right way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions, guys? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Have you seen any real life examples where they have not used a listing, or I'm sorry, a buyer's agent, and anything has gone wrong? Have you seen any at all? I guess I would ask.
I not that it went wrong, but the buyers did contact the listing brokerage afterward and said, "Hey, I think you guys took advantage of me a little bit," because I mean, the listing agent wrote up the contract, so buyer paid for title policy, buyer paid for survey, buyer paid for homeowner warranty, and then maybe they talked to one of their cousins who said, "Hey, you shouldn't have paid for all that stuff. If you had a representative that wouldn't." But I don't think they sued them or anything like that. But in a nutshell, the money they were trying to save, they lost. So our representation does save people money. And I mean, I haven't seen any real examples where an outcome came out of it, but that's not, and that's a very legit way to operate too. It's okay for the buyer's agent to be unrepresented and the listing, the buyer to be unrepresented and the seller to be represented. We run into that, especially with investors sometimes, but we do owe the buyer the disclosure of before you start talking to them, you owe them the disclosure of, look, I want you guys to know I represent the seller and you guys have choices in representation. We owe them that because we don't want them to tell us confidential information that we have to tell the seller. That's gonna create a conflict and a bad situation. They're gonna get mad.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I agree with you, but I have seen a couple of cases. My daughter just bought a house in DC, and she's heard of a couple of cases where they didn't use a buyer's agent, and I mean they took a chance, but I'm just saying it's in the back of their mind of people that are very informed. If
Yeah.
they're not informed, I don't think that they would think about it. But if they're well read and they know what's going on, they're talking about it. You know, that's what she said. That her friends' families are talking about it, and you know, a lot of them don't do it because they're scared. But it just kind of worries me a little bit out in the future.
I agree. I've been looking at just some average numbers here at my firm, and you know, I've got the pleasure of sponsoring about 400 agents, so I can get some numbers together. And you know, on average, we have saved our buyers about 20-30 grand per transaction.
Yeah, I
Really do
agree.
the math. I mean,
Yeah.
there's between sales price and concessions and you know, title policy service, whatever it may be. On average, that's what we're saving them. And you know, this is the biggest investment of most people's lives. You
It
know,
is. Yeah.
and a lot of times people think that all we do is get something under contract. I mean, the other 50% is facilitating that to the
Mhm.
table. That's what they don't see there. The going to bed with butterflies that the VA appraiser's going out there and it's the worst one, and I gotta be out there with a booklet or something to make this work, or figuring out a hardcore repair and a contractor who's cool with getting paid at closing. I mean, we earn our money figuring out
Yeah.
these solutions. And most of the time they don't realize that until it's too late. But
Right.
we just need to keep on bragging about our value. I mean, biggest investment in most people's lives.
Yeah. I think that if they hear more incidents where the buyer got screwed
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
news, they back up.
Unfortunately, I don't want any buyers to get screwed, but I do want to have those scenarios to pitch to people.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Hey, this is what happened here, guys. You know,
Yeah,
so
right.
potentially happen to you as well.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good conversation. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? All right. Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do our attendance verification now. And after that, once you're done with it, you will be free to leave. How this works is you're gonna grab your cell phone, open up your camera, and point your camera at this QR code. Don't take a picture, just point it. Once you point it at this QR code, it should read it, and a link should pop up on your phone. Click on that link, and that link will take you to a spot where you're going to fill in some information about yourselves. Once you're done with that, you are free to leave. I don't want anybody to have to stay any longer than they have to. And some of you guys might be on a mobile device, and we understand it might be a little bit more complicated on mobile devices. Excuse me. So we'll have a monitor put the link to the QR code in the chat box as well for you. For those of you who are leaving, thank you very much. We really appreciate you guys taking your CE with us, and hopefully you guys will be at many more to come. We've got a owner finance in the works that we're getting approved. We've got a loan assumption class in the works we're getting approved, a listing agreement class, and we're also getting approved for NAR Code of Ethics. So we're going to put those on our yearly calendar and on the website as soon as we're approved for that stuff too.
I actually have another question. When I was looking around at CE, the inspectors have a lot of CE available. Can you take any of their classes for credit?
That's a good question. You know, it has to be Trek certified, but Trek
By track?
regulates the inspectors.
Yeah. So maybe,
I think if it's a class, and I'll find this out for you because it's a good question, Martha. I'll contact the education department. But in my opinion, right now, if it's a class
Mhm.
specifically for inspectors, like, hey, these are the standards, I don't think so.
Okay,
But if it's a class given by an inspector that's been, approved CE to teach real estate agents
I
about
gotcha.
the inspection process, I'm gonna say yeah.
Okay.
But I'll find out. I doubt it, that'd be great. I wouldn't mind wouldn't mind giving them their own confidence sometimes and
Yeah,
have
you could, yeah, well, it's good to know about what they're looking at.
yeah, oh exactly. It makes you that much better of a resource for your clients. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd appreciate an answer on that because that was
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, that's a good.
And I took a really good course on inspection. So it was maybe I don't know what it was, an all-day course, I think.
Wow.
So they really got a lot they're looking at. And they're held very accountable.
I agree. That's why when the first 2 pages on the inspection report is all the CYA stuff, right? Hey, we're not responsible. We're not Superman. We can't see in the
Right.
walls. We're not on top of the roof. This is visual. I mean, they really got to lay it out on the lines. In my opinion, if you don't prep a first-time home buyer before an inspection,
Yeah.
the contract's gone. You got to prep them and say, look, guys, there's no such thing as a perfect inspection report.
Right.
We got to look at foundation, roof, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, the cosmetic stuff. Don't worry about it. But I've seen these guys tear up brand new construction homes. So
Yeah,
they
I have
done
two.
something here.
I have two. They did that on my sale.
Yeah.
They really got under the rafters and wow.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
impressive.
It is. It's very impressive and sometimes hypocritical. I'd love to see where they live. See
Yeah.
what it looks like.
Real
Yeah.
quick, Chucky, before I leave, the handouts from Farm and Ranch that were going to be emailed to us, have those?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're scheduled to
Should I
come
have
out
already
today.
received it
No, they're scheduled to come out today because we gave that
on Tuesday?
right? Yeah. We'll make sure that you get it. We'll make sure
Okay,
you get it,
perfect.
brother. And if not, you're gonna get it. But if not, give me a call, shoot me, and we'll make sure that you get that.
I
So
will.
that's a good quick reference right there. It's a good little
Got you.
PowerPoint.
Yes, I love the class. I want to share it with my custom builder as well. I mean, as
Cool.
far as when we get buyers in their land and what have you. So good
Awesome.
stuff. All
Yeah,
right,
thank you.
thanks.
All
I'll
right.
see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for taking class today. Would anybody need this QR code up anymore? All right. Well, I'm gonna stay on here as long as you guys got questions, ladies and gentlemen. But if I know you've been looking at your cell phone vibrate for the last 2 hours, think you're missing out on that $1 million client. You are free to go secure that $1 million client now. And if anybody has any questions, shoot away. I'd love to answer.
Chiaki,
Thank you. I'm
Um,
sorry. Thank
no,
you for
go
the
ahead.
class, okay?
Oh,
Thank you for the class. I'm leaving. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chucky.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, Morgo.
So I'm curious because I came across this years ago. Well, let me change. So for your brokerage, your I don't know how many buyer reps only that you have, but out of the ones that you do, are they coming across the problem where when they start to go through the buyer's rep agreement, that the potential client kind of looks at them and says, well, if I just call the listing agent and go through them, then I don't have to worry about commission. Has that?
I have not seen that yet. Now it depends on the savviness and the education of the client, right? And investors, I'll see them say that, right? They're kind of educated on the times, but the straight up buyer who really isn't knowledgeable on that stuff, they want us. They want us, right? What I'll usually do is I'll use the information about broker services as a segue into it, right? Like there's a spot on information about broker services that goes over sub agency. And it says, as a sub agent, I'm working without an agreement and I must put the owner's interest first.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to them and say, I don't even know that owner. I don't want to put their interest first. I want to put your interest first. And this rep will only do that. Now, what I'm telling people to how to combat the objections to the buyer's rep is, it's usually the same tools as it was back in the day. Term, right? That's usually the best way to do it is with term. Hey, I don't know you. You guys don't know I'm the best realtor in town. I'd like to prove it to you. So why don't we do this agreement for a week or this
Okay.
weekend, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And if you don't like me, it expires and you're not bound to me. You have no obligation at that point. And that makes them feel good. Some people will also put them in the short form, right? They'll put them in the short form and they'll do the showing services. You know how we have the showing services now, we can charge them for showings. What a lot of people don't know is that you don't have to charge them a monetary value, right? So they'll put them in the short form for showing services and they'll put 0. And they're okay with that. They're like, okay,
Okay.
well, I get it now. That makes me feel comfortable. And it still makes the agent compliant with the NAR
Right.
rule because they are in a written agreement before they show them the property. So,
Yeah.
so I have seen people do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. You have a nice
Absolutely.
weekend.
You too. Happy Easter. Y'all have
Happy
a great
Easter.
Easter.
Jackie, this is,
Hopefully we'll
this is
get-
Raul Alvarez. I'm having problems with my scanner. Can you note me as attended?
Yeah, we got you, Raul.
Okay.
You've been in class and I've got all your info right there. You
Okay.
you
Beautiful.
keep
I'm
down and
having
everything.
problems with my scanner.
No problem. We got you covered. I'm gonna take your license down just in case, but 602-132. Yeah.
132.
Yeah, you've been here the whole time, sir. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Jackie, you just mentioned the short form.
Yeah.
Is that another word for something?
No. You know what? It's a new buyer's rep form. That's what it is.
Oh, it's the new
Yeah,
agreement.
yeah.
They call it now the compensation agreement, right?
Well, no, the
Oh, the buyer's rep. Okay.
right. They came out with that, right after this NAR settlement stuff, right?
Right.
And the ideal was it's a less intimidating form,
Oh, the old form. I got
Right.
you.
Because the other
Okay.
one, they're calling it the long form now because it's like 14 pages.
Oh, okay. That's what I haven't heard that terminology.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm already
okay.
I'm already into the acronyms. But yet,
Okay.
have you had a chance to read that buyer's rep short form yet?
The long form?
Yeah, well,
No.
the short form.
Oh, the short form. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so it's got that showing services on there, which is new. It's brand new, and I'm you can charge them up front a fee to show them property.
Oh, wow. I know. I didn't
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, so that's
I have a question for you, Chucky.
yeah, go
When
ahead,
you
Ro.
have an open house, do they have to sign a short form?
Well, I
That's
called
a lot
TXR
of people.
about that same question, Raul. And here's what they told me. If the open house is one of your brokerage's listings,
Yes.
you do not need a buyer's rep for
Oh,
everybody who comes to the door. But there is this practice of a lot of people are saying that, somebody might work for a different brokerage and call you up and say, hey, can I hold your listing
Yes,
open? And,
yes.
people were agreeing to that. I mean, I used to agree to it. It's like, seller gets exposure, sure. In that regard, if it's not your brokerage's listing,
Yes.
you need a buyer's rep for everybody who enters that door. And that was straight from the TXR attorneys.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. I've got agents trying to do it, and
Yeah.
they just got a notebook full of buyer's rep short forms to get them in and make it compliant. But it's tough.
No, I usually don't open houses on HUD homes. I've been selling HUD homes for 10 or 12 years.
Oh yeah, I love HUD. I used to work
Yeah.
for plenty of the broad listing brokers, and
Yeah.
gosh, I remember back when HUD was paying 5% just to the buyer's agent. Those are the good old days.
Art Lilly's my broker out of Austin.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
He's a
yeah.
good broad listing
Been
broker.
working there with him for 12 years. He's a
Good.
good guy.
Yeah.
And I'm in El Paso.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah,
we got some feelers out in El Paso, but please invite as many as you can to come to our classes. Let's get our learn on together because
I've been to a lot of your classes already. I
Good
I
deal.
love them. They're
Thank
good.
you, sir.
Excellent presentations.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Okay. Okay. You too.
Martha.
I'm
happy
done. I listened to everything.
No problem.
Okay.
Y'all have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
I'm trying
Thank
to
you.
figure out how to get turn it off now.
I'll
I
end
got
it
it.
right now. Have a
All right.
good one. Bye.
Thanks.